Are you self-employed? Don't think you need business insurance? Think again. Business insurance from Zensurance is a no-brainer for every business owner because it provides peace of mind. A lot can go wrong. A fire, stolen equipment, or an unhappy customer suing you. That's why you need insurance. Don't let the "I'm too small for this" mindset hold you back from protecting yourself. Zensurance provides customized business insurance policies starting at just $19 per month. Visit Zensurance.com today and buy your policy online in just a few minutes. Zensurance, mind your business.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Navigating this economy has never been more confusing or frustrating. We're here to help with this. I'm Mike Eppel, and this is In This Economy, where we keep you informed on what the latest economic news means for you. The Trudeau government is trying to bring some holiday cheer to consumers and the retail sector with a plan to temporarily lift the federal sales tax off a number of items, all starting December 14th.
We're going to remove the GST, HST from groceries, 100% of groceries, all groceries. We're going to remove the GST from restaurant meals, takeouts, fast food. Removing the GST from beer and wine. Removing the GST for essentials like kids' clothing, footwear, diapers, and toys.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also announced in February of next year, you'll be getting a GST rebate check. That's if you qualify under a certain income threshold.
So if you worked in 2023 and earned up to $150,000, we're going to be sending you a check for $250 in just a few months.
Now, anytime a government announces a stimulus program, there are big implications for the economy. In this case, the government's got to borrow about $6 billion to pay for it, since it's already running a deficit. And the timing of the GST holiday will affect retail spending patterns, and most likely the Bank of Canada's next decision on interest rates. And that's all even if this program can get through a parliament, which is currently in the middle of a procedural standoff. To talk about this, we got in touch with Benjamin Reitzes, Managing Director, Canadian Rates and Macro Strategist at BMO Capital Markets. Benjamin, how are you?
I'm great, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show.
This, to some extent, kind of came out of the blue. It is a proposal, because it's not, certainly it hasn't gone through the legislative process yet, to offer up some GST cuts for a 2-month time frame, just in time for Christmas. And then next year, the plan is to send out $250 rebate checks, which is not kind of unheard of recently, considering what the Ontario government announced. But the cost of this is pretty big. $6 billion, I think, is what you estimated. So what's the rationale here? Is it just, is it an economically sound idea to start? And then we'll maybe get into the politics of it a little bit later.
Economically sound. Well, you've just thrown me a very loaded question. If you consider just pure economics, the answer is no. Quite simply, consumption taxes like the GST or HST in a number of provinces is among the more efficient taxes that government can introduce. And so cutting it would clearly not be sound policy per se. What would be far better would be targeting income taxes, be they corporate taxes or personal taxes, which are much higher compared to our neighbors to the south. That would in turn likely, at a minimum, drive positive incentives to work harder, to invest more in Canada, and maybe improve our productivity, dare I say. But that is not necessarily a politically popular idea. And I think maybe more importantly, and this is a little bit consistent with what we've gotten out of the provinces, these are one-time items. So you get a one-time cut in the GST, you get one-time $250 check. Ontario sends out a one-time $200 check per person. The one-time items means that you don't have a recurring cost here. And so unlike a broader tax cut, which you have to pay for forever, this is just a one-time thing. Maybe people smile and maybe they like you a bit better for the near term and see what comes next.
Well, the timing of it, obviously, for the holidays, I mean, it's obviously meant to spur on spending. It's obviously meant to alleviate some of the pressure that everyone is feeling regarding the cost of living. And it sounds like the government's doing something, or at least trying. So from that standpoint, that I would almost argue that that's a bit of a win.
It probably should drive a political win. I mean, who doesn't like free money? I'm pretty sure you can't find anybody that doesn't want a check for nothing. And the GST cut over that, or GST cut over the period and the holidays is very much welcome. I mean, I don't mind going to the grocery store. I don't mind paying less for my groceries. I don't mind paying less for my children's clothing. I have to buy my son a video game, like a joystick, effectively a very fancy one. He's been waiting for a year for. I'm going to wait till December 14th now, because guess what? I'm going to get 13% off. Why wouldn't I do that? So the part of the problem is you're driving kind of inefficient decisions like that. You shouldn't be tempting me to not spend money until December 14th, for example. But it will drive happiness to some extent for some people, especially the free money part. And then it drives some holiday cheer, definitely. But is it efficient, which was your first question? Is it efficient from an economic perspective? The answer is no.
Well, you also raised an interesting point that people will now, I mean, we're coming up to Black Friday weekend. And if people hear this and they say this rebate's coming into effect December 14th, they're going to wait. And I'm not sure if the retail sector, on first blush, they might be saying this is a good plan, but maybe they're going, wait a second, this is going to really delay our sales for potentially 2 weeks.
That's exactly right. You may need to see some deeper discounts on Black Friday. And even then, people might be like, well, if it's this cheap now, why don't I wait 2 more weeks and then I get another 13% off? Certainly possible. And this is part of the problem with timing these kinds of things. And when the government just picks a certain time and certain sectors that are winners and losers, you drive potentially inefficient decision making. And maybe that's what we get this time around, unfortunately. And it would not shock me if the categories that are included in this GST rebate see much weaker activity over the next couple of weeks, except for, of course, kind of some of the food items in there.
Do you think, though, that they can put this into process? And this is a political question, because the Parliament's been stymied for the past better part of 2 months, right? With this filibuster by the Conservatives on that issue of they want the Liberals to release some documentation about the Green Slush Fund and an investigation potentially by the RCMP. That in and of itself is a roadblock, and the NDP don't seem to want to budge on that, but they say they'll support this. But then at the retail level itself, how easy is it to just change your, cash registers or output to all of a sudden take off the GST on certain items, but also leave it on other things?
That's probably a question for a more maybe like the Retail Council of Canada, at least that last part. But I asked the exact same question. There are clearly menu costs involved when you have to change your prices and change your computer systems and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure how easy it is to flip a switch and say, okay, well, XYZ doesn't have to pay that 13% or more, but ABC still has to pay it. And we get a little bit of that anyways. There are already some items that are exempt from GST, HST. And so there is some of that in there. I'm not certain on how challenging it is to change, but I would guess it's not that easy. But again, I'll leave that to an expert, which is not me. On the political side, though, I mean, if the NDP say they're willing to support it, you have to assume that they're probably going to in some way, shape, or form end this filibuster. Otherwise, it doesn't pass, and the government might fall sooner rather than later if they can't get this type of signature kind of stimulus through the holidays through Parliament. But it definitely drives a little bit more political uncertainty in Canada, that's for sure. And we'll see where we end up over the next couple of weeks. You still keep in mind, going back to last year's budget, I don't believe they've passed the capital gains tax changes yet either. And so there's plenty of uncertainty out there and still lots that seemingly needs to get done in Parliament that may not get done. And perhaps this new stimulus is no different.
There hasn't been a fall fiscal update. And the way from what I understand, they actually have to do that to actually, do they not? I heard that. Okay, well, correct me then if I'm wrong.
So in 2000, I'm told by our chief economist, in 2002 they skipped the fall economic statement. I don't believe it's mandatory to put one out, and I'm not not 100% sure, but that is our belief at this point in time. And so far, we've had no inklings at all that a fall economic statement's coming. We're going to get any kind of budget update, which then begs the question of where is all this money going to come from for this stimulus package? Are we maybe running ahead of forecast on revenues, on growth? That seems kind of unlikely given the fiscal numbers we've seen on a monthly basis. They've been pointing to wider deficits, not narrower deficits. Mm-hmm. And so this will only widen them even further.
The idea, if you cut taxes temporarily or otherwise, that should be an economic stimulus. And for the companies that are selling things, their tax receipts will go up, right, for their earnings. So actually it might actually generate quite a bit of revenue.
I mean, that doesn't seem like a high probability given the cost here. I would expect you'd get some offset on the income tax side from the corporations, but it is temporary. Keep that in mind. So does it boost economic output? Exactly. Any windfall you might get in that temporary period where consumers spend more money, they just offset that by spending less money later, likely. So that's the nature of temporary stimulus. You get kind of a one-time boost, and then either some payback, which is, reasonable to expect, or just one time, and you don't get a continued increase in revenues or growth.
So let's get into what this means for the average household. Not that they're, aside from getting a GST holiday and those checks next year, again, that is income tested. For the Bank of Canada, we are a week and a half away from a decision on interest rates. Inflation was 2% in the last month, and that didn't sound like too much of a concern, but I'm seeing that the possibility of a 50 basis point cut is probably now entirely off the table if you're talking about inflation at 2% and coming out with an economic stimulus plan.
Well, we were leaning that way anyways. And interestingly, I've gone from being one of the more downbeat people on Bay Street about the Canadian economy to being one of the more upbeat people in just a matter of 2 weeks, because everybody seems to have turned very, very negative on Canada in the past month or so. And if you take into account the stimulus measures announced that are going to add 2 to 3 tenths to growth over the coming year, if you include the Ontario stimulus as well, you take into account that inflation may have been 2%, but what we saw was that it was actually higher than expected, and was higher than the Bank of Canada expected, especially on the core inflation measures. So you take that into account, and the Federal Reserve has sounded much less willing to be cutting rates aggressively at this point. It sounds like while they might cut rates again in December, there's an outside chance they could actually pause in December. And if they don't pause in December, they're probably pausing in January. And so if you take all those things together, it suggests the Bank of Canada just doesn't really need to be as aggressive as they were in October. And so they're still going to be cutting rates. I don't think there's any debate there, but they just don't need to be as aggressive. So 25 basis points in December, 25 in January, 25 in March, and then maybe we'll see a little bit. Things might get a little bit more uncertain.
I wonder if some mortgage holders or debt households who have mortgage up for renewal are on one hand going, "Yay, GST holiday." Flip side, my rates aren't coming down fast. Oh,
there's two sides to every coin for sure. What's interesting about mortgage rates is you've had the bond market rallied a lot over the prior kind of before the U.S. election, let's say, and in that few months beforehand. And mortgage rates had come down, but maybe hadn't shown the full extent of that retreat in rates. And now we've backed up a fair amount in 5-year yields, for example, which tend to set mortgage rates. And mortgage rates haven't backed up either. So I think we're in a spot where, from a fixed mortgage rate perspective, if we don't get a huge amount of market volatility, we could stay around these levels, and that is much higher than they were 5 years ago, admittedly. But people have been prepared for that. Like if you had a mortgage coming up this year, you're more than aware that rates are higher than they were in 2020. At least I hope so.
Thank you. Good talking to you.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm happy to come on anytime.
That wraps up this episode of In This Economy. If you have an idea about a show or topic or a personal finance question, you can get in touch anytime by emailing us. The email address is hello@itepod.ca. Our phone number is 416-935-5935. Thanks for listening.
Are you self-employed? Don't think you need business insurance? Think again. Business insurance from Zensurance is a no-brainer for every business owner because it provides peace of mind. A lot can go wrong. A fire, stolen equipment, or an unhappy customer suing you. That's why you need insurance. Don't let the "I'm too small for this" mindset hold you back from protecting yourself. Zensurance provides customized business insurance policies starting at just $19 per month. Visit Zensurance.com today and buy your policy online in just a few minutes. Zensurance, mind your business.